Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Nina and I'm from ArtScience Museum. Thank you for joining us today for this new session in our talk series, Feeling the Future, as part of our online program, Art Science at Home. Feeling the Future examines the human capacity to imagine new futures in an uncertain world, and it explores the role of our emotional response as we're processing the impact of change. We've already had some really fascinating insights from a broad range of speakers. So if you haven't yet heard all the talks in the series, I hope you'll go back later and explore the full program. But today I'm delighted to introduce two new speakers to you, Lynn Froggett and Lizzie Muller, who will do a talk for us on exhibitions and cultural contagion. Lynn Froggett is Professor of Psychosocial Welfare at the University of Central Lancashire in the UK. And Lizzie Muller is Associate Professor at the University of New South Wales Art and Design in Sydney, Australia. In recent years, they've been involved in some fascinating new research funded by the Australian Research Council into the ways in which visitors make meaning during their visits to museums and cultural institutions. Today, Lynn and Lizzie will talk us through some of their current thinking, which is grounded in very specific social audience research at museums. They will talk about the role of cultural institutions in surfacing some of those unconscious feelings about complex issues that we might have, about issues such as the future. I'm delighted to welcome Lynn Froggett and Lizzie Muller.
Thank you, Nina. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land where I'm speaking to you from. That's Bulli down on the Illawarra and on the New South Wales south coast, the Wadi people of the Dharawal Nation. And I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. I'm here with my colleague, Lynn Froggett, who is joining us from Hebden Bridge in the UK. And we're both very grateful to Nina and to everyone at the ArtScience Museum for hosting us here and for inviting us to speak as part of this wonderful series about feeling the future. This is a topic that we've been working on with the ArtScience Museum for a number of years already, together with other museums around the world that explicitly mix art and science, including the Powerhouse Museum in Sydney and the Foundation for Art and Creative Technology in the UK. We've been investigating the way that cultural institutions create civic third spaces for cultivating future thinking collectively. For us, the third space represented by these organisations is more than just the meeting point between C.P. Snow's two cultures of art and science. For us, third space is a physical, psychic, and a social space where lots of different kinds of knowledge are brought together. This includes knowledge generated from scientific research, from technological innovation, from creative practice, but also from the personal and collective knowledge that audiences bring to those spaces. In 2017, we came to the ArtScience Museum in Singapore to find out how audiences were making use of an exhibition called Human Plus, the Future of the Species. That show was really concerned with the technological future of humankind. So we were specifically asking the question, how do exhibitions provide spaces and resources for imagining the future? And it's fascinating now to look back at what came out of that research, because we can see that the audience we were working with back then with Human Plus were actually using that exhibition to feel the future that we are experiencing now in 2020. In a moment, Lynn will look in more detail at the method that we use to gather that data, which is based on a kind of collaborative process of producing verbal imagery in response to an exhibition. But I just wanted to start the talk today with an example that gives you a sense of what feeling the future looks like when you're in an exhibition. So we invited a group of robotics engineers to take part in one of our audience workshops. And this group were experts in the future. If you like, they were even authors of the future. They created amazing technological innovations as part of their daily work. And there were plenty of experiences of robot-human interaction in the exhibition that they could have drawn from. But their experience of the exhibition actually prompted them to generate and describe images that conveyed deeply held and surprising anxieties, not about rampant technological adaptation of the human species, but actually about the existential threat of a kind of resurgent and indifferent force of nature. One of the really powerful images that emerged and that they worked with during our workshop together was of the single-celled parasite which causes toxoplasmosis in humans, also enters into mice, and in those mice causes them to lose their fear of cats and to behave in ways that they wouldn't normally behave, to be able to just walk casually past a cat so that the cat will eat the mouse and the parasite will be able to enter the cat and to continue its life cycle. And this was an idea or an image that these robotics engineers were really interested in. For us, this was an image of someone slowly changing their nature, perhaps not necessarily in their best interests, in response to a kind of infiltration from a small parasitic being. This image of the parasite and the kind of flow of imagery that surrounded it revealed existing anxieties circulating about contagion, infection, and overwhelm by pathogens, microbes, and bacteria. A future in which the very nature of humans is altered by microorganisms slowly and inexorably evolving. And this, I think, is a future that we are all very much feeling today. Although we began our work in 2016, our findings have emerged in the context of a pandemic. And they've been accompanied also, I think, by an infodemic of often confusing and conflicting public health messaging. This is a product of social media contagion, where public information and reasoned debates are easily derailed or corrupted by fake news, by conspiracy theories, and memes that are replicated wildly and that go viral. This kind of infodemic has an impact on our ability to think creatively and realistically about the future. It leads to a fragmentation of the future, which is felt differently by different groups in society. By the young, by the old, by the vulnerable, and by the resilient. And now more than ever, we need exhibitions in our museums, physical spaces for feeling together and to support the civic and public conversation where we can feel those futures collectively, no matter which of those groups we're part of.
To get this kind of data, we used a group-based psychosocial method called the visual matrix. By psychosocial, we mean that we are interested in the interaction between a social situation and what people bring to it, including their life experiences and inner worlds. The visual matrix is designed to gather people's association to what they see and hear and feel in an exhibition. Of course, these associations are formed by the culture in which they live, as much as their individual lived experience. The process of the visual matrix group is designed to tap into the public's cultural imaginary. Now, by a cultural imaginary, we are referring to the stories, images, landscapes, and soundscapes that we share and that allow us to collectively recount our past and imagine a future together. Because imaginaries are shifting and ephemeral, they're very hard to describe or define, and they arise through a sort of collaging of shared cultural resources. They're generally unarticulated and partly unconscious, but they inform the background assumptions of the way we live with one another. They are, in the words of psychoanalyst Christopher Bollas, an unthought known, but they're nevertheless profoundly influential in the way we think and act. These stories and images that make up a cultural imaginary are not neutral. They symbolize our anxieties and desires, and it may be hard to tell where they come from. Fragments of literature, social ritual, social media, news items, built environment, film, natural landscapes, and so on. But they tap into intimate and deeply felt needs that arise in relation to other people and the environment, and they are drenched in affect. We have feelings about them, and we catch these feelings from one another, for good or for ill. We catch them, but like a virus, we don't always know it until the symptoms emerge, perhaps mildly in the form of circulating states of mind or public moods, or more severely in the form of moral or social panics that undermine our ability to imagine a better future, and perhaps find expression in disturbing or dystopian visions. This slide shows babies adapted for survival in a harsh and heating world. Or this picture of Stellark, the artist, under total control of an insentient and unthinking machine. With images like these, at worst, we are pitched into a defensive cynicism, which can even take on a darkly humorous note. Communities like medics who regularly face suffering and death are known to defend themselves collectively by resorting to gallows humor. Or this euthanasia roller coaster that thrillingly transports its riders towards their fatal end. Or more likely, this eco-coffin, powered by the effluence of the decomposing corpse that it houses. Unlike a disease, however, in other respects, social contagion can also potentially be a creative force, arousing a hopefulness and a constructively critical spirit, responding to a collective will to imagine a better future. Build back better, as they say. Everything here depends on the conditions in which hope is caught and whether or not it leads on to the conversation between reflective and engaged citizens.
So this is where the civic space, the civic third space of the museum, has a crucial part to play. And perhaps more importantly, the work that the audience does in museums, building connections, associations, and creating new knowledge. One of the misconceptions about audience experience is that it's something that happens to audiences as a result of the work of artists or curators. But actually, our research shows that audiences themselves are building experience and meaning actively. They're working very hard together with the resources that they're given in the exhibition. So to give you another example of that, we've talked already about the robotics engineers, but another group that we worked with when we were at the ArtScience Museum was young students between 18 and 20 who were studying in technical design colleges. And these are people who are really on the brink of their working lives and who will help us to define technological futures and who have everything to gain from the kind of futures of work. They were clearly influenced in the images that they produced by images of automated work environments and also by images of automated personal relationships. We found that the students were apprehensive about the kind of rapidity of change that they were experiencing and that they imagined happening in the future. And they were particularly worried about whether or not they would be forced to adapt so much that they would actually kind of break and would no longer recognize themselves. Their anxieties circulated, I think, understandably around work, human connection, and relationships. This is the kind of future anxiety that could induce a kind of dejected passivity or even a cynicism born of despair. But instead, what happened in the context of the exhibition space is that these students, these young people, like the robot engineers, began to produce their own imagery, drawing from, but also moving beyond images that were offered to them in the exhibition, which is a really sure sign of a kind of generative and creative intelligence at work. So here are some quotes from those students. And what they're talking about is the idea that the future of work is going to be this future of coding, writing code in a cave. So they talk about the future of blue-collar jobs and how those futures they feel are going to be unemotional, how they're not going to allow an interface between people, and eventually they're going to be boring. Like the robotics engineers, you can see here that the students are foreshadowing aspects of our experience of 2020, where we all find ourselves kind of sheltering in our respective caves and pouring much of our need for human connection into our computer screens. In doing this, the students are articulating what Lynn has just described as an unthought known. So there's an image there that connects their own technological future with a kind of prehistoric image of cave dwelling, but also with Plato's iconic image of the cave where shadows are mistaken for reality. So in the workshop that we held with these students, this complex kind of multi-layered image proved to be a real turning point for the students, who then kind of went on to affirm the centrality of human relationships and of human agency in the futures that they actually want to bring into being. Both the robotics engineers and the students could be thought of as groups with really high stakes in technological futures that were being represented by Human Plus. But in a very short space of time, both of them, in the research that we conducted, felt their way into a shared mode of future thinking that was not only connected to uncomfortable social anxieties, but also emotionally grounded, in a sense that desirable futures, the futures that they wanted to experience, needed to preserve human agency and relationships. So I think this is a really great example of how in both of those cases, feeling the future allowed those two groups to think quite differently, collectively, and to imagine quite differently the futures that they want. That they were able to achieve this collective rethinking of the future had much to do with the particular conditions created in the third space of the exhibition. And that really brings us back to the role right now for the museum.
Our argument is that the museum is a civic space that brings into public view cultural resources that we hold in common so that they can be thought about. But can it still perform this function in a post-COVID context when we're unable to meet and converse in the same physical public space? Exhibitions combine images, stories, and ideas to reflect the world we live in back to us and draw forth aspects of the cultural imaginary, enabling us to symbolize and interpret it in new ways. The best of them invite the audiences to work with the material they offer, bringing their own experiences as well as the lived emotional worlds of anxiety and desire into the spaces they create. The space of interaction between the audience and the exhibition, that we've called third space, is where the unthought known emerges and finds a form in the new imaginings that are generated. These are the forms of feeling, as philosopher of art and music Susanne Langer called them. The sensory deprivation of the cave coder, the ruthlessness of the parasite that transforms its host to ensure its own survival, the revulsion we feel at babies adapted for an environment that we have rendered hostile. These feelings were not created by the exhibition. They were brought forth to find symbolic expression in the exhibition imagery, but they were ideas in circulation already as unthought knowns, which once they are expressed can be detoxified in the process of public reflection and conversation. Catching them then produces the sense of a common culture, of contained and shared structures of feeling, rather than the unmediated overwhelm of social contagion. This leads us to see the third space of the museum as a psychic, social, and material space that has a critical civic and cultural function in our lives, on and offline. Even if, for the time being, our futures have to be shared through our screens, museums like the ArtScience Museum are still finding ways to create third spaces together. Thank you for joining us.
That was Lynn Froggett and Lizzie Muller talking about cultural contagion, this idea that we might catch feelings or ideas as they circulate in the social cultural sphere. If you caught any ideas today, or indeed if you have any questions for Lynn and Lizzie, please come back and join us on the 9th of July at 4 p.m. Singapore time, when we'll have a live Q&A with both researchers. You can pose your questions to them directly during the live chat. Indeed, I hope you'll join us for the future talks as part of the Feeling the Future series. We have some exciting new sessions coming up with award-winning architect and artist Richard Hassel, and with thought leader and co-founder of the Thought Collective, Tong Yi. So do please join us. Thank you for being here today at Art Science at Home.